Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reserve Team podcast, your home of everything Australian and New Zealand football. My name is Branson Gibson. I am your host for episode 18 of the Reserve Team podcast. We've got a big discussion topic this week. I did want to hijack the show and make the discussion topic about the handball rule and the implications that it's having on the game, and specifically Fulham's chances at surviving in the Premier League. But Sean has been able to rein me in. So rather than that, this week we are going to be talking about broadcast deals. We're going to be unpacking Sportflick's swoop on the Champions League. We'll discuss what it means for fans and the potential impact it could have on the A-League as well. Joining me today on the podcast, we have Bill Brooks. How's it going, Bill?
I'm good, thanks, Bran. Thanks for having me on. I'm keen to be here.
No worries. Glad that you could join us. And as always, we have Sean Matheson. Hello, Sean.
Good afternoon, Bran. Hope you're having a good day. Hey, Bill. Good to be chatting with you. And happy International Women's Day to all of our female supporters, both in the reserve team and outside as well. Excited to get through some interesting stuff that we're going to cover in today's episode.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to have some big discussions about Sportsflick, KO, Optus Sport, what broadcast deals will look like in the future in Australia and around the world, and what it means for fans. This podcast this week, it will look a little bit different. The weekend recap is back, so rather than going over the results again, we're going to jump straight into our discussion topic, which is, of course, the broadcast deals. So last week, Sean, we saw Sportsflick. They shocked the football community when it was reported that the little-known broadcaster had swooped in to swipe the rights to the UEFA Champions League off Optus Sport as part of a 3-year deal worth a reported $60 million. Sportsflick niche, to say the least. My first question for both of you, Bill, I'll start with you, is had you ever heard of Sportflick?
I've got to say, until I heard that the Champions League rights had passed on, I didn't have a clue who Sportsflick were, and then I saw obviously they had gone to Sportsflick, and I had to sort of do a bit of research. So not until the announcement came out, but yeah, it's all new to me.
How about you, Sean? Had you heard of them or come across them, or did you even know that they existed at all before they made the big news last week?
So Sportsflick, no. I did recognise a couple of the names associated with the company. Dylan Azzopardi is like kind of the main man there. He's only like 26, 27, something like that. And I'd seen him in and around Twitter, because obviously soccer Twitter is like one big football family. Occasionally tweets kind of get likes on them, or people that you know will share stuff and whatever else. So I knew who he was, and I knew who he wasn't verified. So like that kind of pointed me in a direction that Sportsflick perhaps wasn't the biggest, or, kind of up and coming as far as different promotional materials and different broadcasters are concerned. But then out of nowhere, and we'll talk about this a little bit further, he's pulled a whole wad of cash out of his pocket. We don't know where that's been sourced from. But yeah, definitely jumping to like the top of the headlines as far as broadcast partnerships in Australia are concerned.
Well, taking a look at their current offerings, the UEFA Champions League is obviously the biggest product on their list. Some of the other sports that they currently offer as part of their subscription service include Serbian Rugby League, some lower tier mixed martial arts. They've got cricket at the moment. You can watch Bangladesh taking on the West Indies. They announced this week as well they've got the rights to the Austrian Bundesliga. They got the K-League off Optus Sport last month. They have the Women's Champions League and the Liga Primera, which is the top league in Nicaragua. So when it comes to, big name leagues, they haven't necessarily got a whole lot there. So, I mean, for them to come in and get the Champions League, obviously it's shocking, Sean, but what does this mean for Sportsflick? Like, are they going to emerge as a serious contender, or is this just sort of, a flash in the pan kind of thing?
So, sorry, did you mention the amount that they've paid for the Champions League rights in that little recap?
Yeah. 3-year deal worth a reported $60 million, so $20 million a year. I'm not sure what Optus Sport were paying for the Champions League. I don't know if that has been disclosed.
Yeah, so I don't think it has been, but by all understanding, and this is just reporting and speculation, we don't quite know. Apparently, Optus was kind of like blown away by the amount that Sportsflick offered and wasn't willing to go to that like level and extent. Obviously, Optus, kind of going through their history briefly, they started really as a football broadcaster during the 2018 World Cup. somewhat disastrously at various points. All technical issues. The actual programming they put together was pretty decent. They showed the game respect, but then they had to hand back some of those rights to SBS to make sure that the games were being presented if people had those technical difficulties throughout the course of the series. So they haven't had like the longest history, so to speak, only since 2018, but they have slowly put together a very like good footballing program with their Premier League and Champions League coverage. The interesting portion about Sportsflick is that because none of us have really seen it, we don't know what their standards are like in terms of their presentation, and if they intend for this to be purely just a rebroadcast of another nation or another broadcaster in an international country, their product. So it could be potentially that Sportsflick isn't going to be doing too much development on their own side. They're only hosting the platform that then shows the BBC's coverage or the Sky coverage or whatever it may be in and around the English-speaking world. So fascinating to see, one, where they've pulled that money out of, because I don't think anybody really expected like a random startup from Sydney with a less than 30-year-old CEO to be kind of pulling that cash out, but then also to see what direction this takes them as a footballing provider in the country.
And you touched on sort of like, the broadcast experience, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on. I think that's something certainly worth discussing. But Bill, what are your first impressions of this deal? Is it a good deal or a bad deal?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think if you look at sort of broadcasting rights in terms of European football at the moment, there's sort of, I guess, if the way I look at it, two big hitters in terms of Optus and KO. Optus at the moment obviously have the Premier League and the Champions League, and KO have got the Bundesliga and La Liga, and that sort of, you can get that through beIN, of course, as well. But I think sports are coming onto the scene. It's quite interesting because it provides a bit of competition for the two, and I don't know, it might be interesting to see if it perhaps lifts the standards across the board. They might see that they might want to offer perhaps a better package to try and boost their stocks, obviously. So I think it'd be interesting to see if it does end up boosting an overall standard. But I'm not really sure yet as of yet. But I think it's interesting, and I don't have an issue with things opening up in terms of that market, I think.
Sean, do you think this kind of competition is good? Like, as Bill sort of touched on there, do you think it'll have an impact on Optus Sport and KO? Like, do you think it'll help keep them honest, or maybe keep them on their toes and sort of show that they have to up their game, that there is, that there are other players in the game who can potentially swoop for these rights and steal them off them?
That's kind of a big question to unpack, and maybe we'll recover some of those topics as we go through, because
we'll break it down as well as we go on.
Yeah, because clearly I think the thing that we've kind of like harped on about for probably the last like 6 to 8 weeks is that Fox Sports really doesn't give a shit at all about the quality of their broadcast at the moment, and they've cut cameras and they've not got the best pundits and all that sort of stuff. There are positives to their broadcast that I don't think we've touched on. Like, it's great seeing Emma Checker and Teo Pellizzeri did that W League last night, and having actual active players more involved in broadcast is offering quite a bit. Jamie McLaren's done it throughout the course of the season. Neil Kilkenny's been on a couple of times on the A-League side. That part I'm enjoying quite a bit, but like, they clearly don't care. Like, they literally will only get the commentators in the stadium if a game's in Sydney. Everything else is being done remotely and not being done particularly well. They're also only doing like the 3 camera setup, which is quite difficult when you're trying to do replays for fouls and handballs and whatever else. Good example, most recently, I think Western Sydney Wanderers were quite aggrieved that they got a penalty against them. It only had one camera angle, which was from like 60 metres away. And they still gave the penalty on VAR decisions. So Fox Sports isn't being driven by any of these additional broadcasters to improve their product at all. If anything, it's probably getting worse. And I think they're deliberately trying to devalue the value of the A-League and W League because they want to try and drive down the price. What's fascinating is the way that it's going to change platforms. In reality, thinking back again to 2018 when Optus Sport kind of picked up their World Cup coverage, there weren't that many online platforms that were offering different broadcast deals. There wasn't really much in terms of Premier League as far as online viewership. You actually had to have a Fox Sports subscription. They did have a website that you could watch it through, but it wasn't like the way that we would treat like a Netflix or a Disney Plus or a Stan now. Stan Sports come to the fore, and I think that makes it more competitive. I don't know if they're necessarily looking at football. We know that KO is a subsidiary of Fox that purely came about because they were trying to compete with Optus Sport and their sports offering from an online and digital space. So I think it does change the different ways that we're watching football and that we're watching sport overall, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to do too much to drive each one to get better. It may impact the pricing and it may impact the demand for other sports, but we'll touch on that a little bit further as we go.
I totally agree with what you said there, in the way that the way in which we watch football has totally changed over the past 5 years with the sort of Netflix streaming revolution. But one of the things that we sort of touched on as well that I want to get into is, what do you think this means for the broadcasting service. Like, sorry, what I mean is what is Sportsflick going to offer? Because one thing that we've seen with Optus Sports, in particular for the Premier League and the Champions League, is, they have pre-game shows. Mark Schwartz, a former Socceroo, former Fulham player, works for Optus Sport, and, he does live crosses at games. They have the pre-game show, they have the halftime show, they have the post-game show. Are we going to see that from Sportsflick, Bill? What do you think we can expect from them? And also, sorry, just another thing I remembered as well with Optus as well, they do all the highlight packages that go up on YouTube for the Premier League, for the Champions League as well, which are fantastic, and they go up, just a couple of hours after the game. So it could be a downside with Sportsflick if we sort of lose some of that professionalism and the wide range of, I suppose you would say, additional offerings.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because obviously Sportsflick are fairly new onto the scene, and obviously, we haven't obviously heard of them until fairly recently. But I think it'll be very interesting to see how they look to model their sort of brand and what product they offer us with the Champions League. I think that'll be a key test because obviously it's one of the most watched football competitions in the world. So I don't think there'll be many Australians that'll be passing up an opportunity to watch it. So it'll be interesting to see what they offer us in terms of enticing us to watch that competition, obviously through their platform because they've got the rights now. But it'll be interesting to see sort of what they offer outside of, just the football coverage. If they offer all these extra things like Optus Sport have done. And I thought it was interesting, Optus Sport did their like state of football stuff last year where they got all the ex-Socceroos like Vinnie Grella and Mark Viduka and those guys to have a chat about the state of Australian football. And I thought that sort of stuff was really interesting in terms of engaging with Australian fans when they maybe, obviously don't have broadcast rights for the A-League, but they're still engaging with other audiences. So it'd be interesting to see if Sportflick maybe try and do something like that to bring people in as well. I'm not sure.
Sean, I've got a question for you. What does this mean for football fans? Because I'll be honest, when I first saw that the Champions League was going to Sportsflick, going to a different subscription service, my first thought was, well, that's just another subscription service we're going to have to pay for. So if we look at it at the moment, taking a look at the current subscriptions that, the Aussie football fan is likely to have. So you've got KO, obviously, to watch the A-League and the W League. So that's $25 a month. You've got Sportsflick, who offer $15 a month for their subscription, and then Optus Sport on top of that, which is also $15 a month. So we're paying $55 per month total across the board to watch these packages. Is that too much? Are the fans the biggest loser from this?
Look, I don't think the biggest loser. I think it's kind of actually starting to reflect how our fans view and want to watch football. Now, I fully disclose, I'm now into my 30s. I cannot be bothered getting up at 3 and 4 a.m. to watch games anymore, nor do I have it in me to stay up to 1 and 2 a.m. I do it occasionally, but I don't do it every weekend the way I did earlier on in my life and career to watch the Premier Division games and to watch the Champions League games and all that sort of stuff. On the other side of that as well, I'm a Manchester United fan, so we haven't been doing shit in the Champions League for a good few years. We've had a couple of Europa League runs, but the reality is we're not involved in that competition. I think particularly in Australia, there's obviously a huge Liverpool viewership from the 80s when we had Craig Johnson, all that playing, and then obviously throughout the 90s period, the likes of Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea, all had very good Australian viewer bases where if those 4 teams are in the Champions League, you're probably going to get a greater amount of interest, but no one's going to pay for that subscription base if their team isn't involved. I don't think there's that many people that would actively watch that competition outside of the semi-finals and finals if their team isn't actually involved. They just tune in to try and watch the big fixtures or the marquee ties or whatever else. And I think that's kind of reflective of where the Champions League is at the moment, that Optus Sport wasn't particularly fussed about letting it go, or that they looked at the amount of money that was being put into it and said, this is not a sustainable amount for our current, viewership or membership model. They would have more data at Optus and metrics about what sports are being watched by what people. And if they have been, given the opportunity to match that $60 million and it was within their scope of subscriber base or it was within their scope of football fan base, I think you'd be more likely to do that. The challenge for Sportsflick is that there isn't a lot of overlap, I think, between their current service offerings, like the Nicaraguan Premier League, no disrespect to any of our Nicaraguan fans, and Serbian rugby and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think there's a lot of people that are already enrolled in that service that are now going to just say, oh, great, now I've got the Champions League as well. I think they're going to be entirely driven by having to bring in new football fans, and that might be a challenge. If your team's not involved in the Champions League, are you really going to pay $15 or $55 a month, as you've kind of outlined, to go and watch this competition that your team's not involved in? Not really. So they're kind of chopping down their own market share by not having additional value of something like the Premier League or something like, and we might get to it down the track, the A-League or W League offering as well.
Bill, what are your thoughts? I mean, it's just another $15 a month that, football fans have to pay. What about you personally? Are you likely to subscribe to Sportsflick for the Champions League? What impact is it going to have on you? And then what do you think it's going to mean for football fans overall?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think obviously every football fan is going to reevaluate now whether they want to spend that extra money to watch the Champions League. And myself, as a bit of a Liverpool fan, it doesn't look like we're going to be in the Champions League next season now. So it's probably helping my decision in that respect. But I don't know. I found myself a bit like Sean, even though I'm not quite as old as you, Sean. I found myself not being able to be bothered to get up quite as early for the games and that sort of thing of the last sort of 12 months or so. So that probably weighs into it a bit as well. But I think for those dedicated fans, I think if you're at the point where you're dedicated enough to get up at that time of the morning or stay up, and do pull these all-nighters sort of to watch games, probably that $15 a month or that extra fee probably wouldn't deter them, I would imagine. I imagine to be the people who sit on the fence and probably aren't as keen to probably stay up for the games regardless or get up for the games, that probably would be less likely to part with their money to begin with, I think.
And I might jump in there. Sorry, Bill, and sorry, Brian. But just doing some quick math on it while you're in the background there, assuming that $20 million per year is still at their $15 price point at the moment, they need to get 1,333,000 subscribers to jump in and pay for that package, without even taking into account the additional cost of actually operating and running that. So there's operational costs that will create even more with that. I don't know of the 26 million people in Australia, how close they're actually going to get to that figure. And I think that's the fascinating portion with it. If you try and, that's very basic maths. I'm not an economist. We will let the accountants, we will let whoever else who actually knows what they're talking about try and work out that aggregate. But I think that's the fascinating part for me. They seem to think there's a market out there of more than 1 million fans, or more than 333,000 fans that they think they can bring across their platform purely based on Champions League rights. And to be honest, my personal opinion is that Champions League is probably like the lower of the three big ones that we'll probably talk about, which is EPL domestic and then the continental competitions.
Well, I think...
Yeah, go Bill.
I think, to be fair though, I think you might look at it as this may be step one for Sports League. We don't know if they've got more plans in the future. Obviously, there's an A-League broadcast deal that's potentially expiring at the end of the season. If they start looking at these things, and you said they don't have a lot to offer at the moment outside of the Champions League, but if they maybe can snag one or two more interesting broadcast rights deals, it might make that difference, and then that might make up those numbers, even if they do have to put out a bit more money to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting, and those numbers that you mentioned there, Sean, are fascinating as well. The potential for them to, have they overestimated, the demand for the Champions League? Me personally, I'm a Fulham fan, so they're obviously not in the Champions League. I don't have a ton of interest for it. I don't mind watching it when it's on. When the match days are similar to what you guys were saying. I won't particularly get up early to watch a team that I'm not invested in. But during the day, I might watch replays, but there's no way that for me, not being a fan of a team that's likely to appear in that competition, I'd like to be proven wrong. But anyway, I'm not going to go out and spend $15 a month on that. So focusing on Australia, though, what do we think that this could mean for the A-League and the W League future broadcast deals here? So, if we talk about Fox Sports and KO, so they renegotiated their deal last year amid the COVID-19 shutdown. It was previously a $57 million a year long-term contract, and they renegotiated that down to $32 million, and that just covers the 2020-2021 season. It also does not include the FFA Cup competition, which had previously been included. What do we think this is going to mean for football in Australia, Sean? What is this going to mean? We'll start off with Sportsflick, and potential bids they could make, and then we'll move on to Optus and what it means for KO.
So we don't know too much about the actual funding model behind Sportsflick, and that's why some of the stuff that we're going to talk about is speculation. But shout out to Emma Kemp at The Guardian, who put together a fantastic article kind of outlining the business and where that is. We'll put a link to that one in the description below. But their parent company, DCA Sydney Enterprises, like the one that owns Sportsflick, is Dylan Azzopardi and his brother Justin, who we already mentioned, who have like a residential address in Sydney that is the business address for this one. They've also got different input from a CFO who's a part of like a partnership group for a law firm. She does accounting work for them. As is Calaf, Blacktown local, whose main other business is Vela Brothers Smash Repairs. And then the big one, the one that I think is driving a lot of the funding at the moment, is Red Star Belgrade Rugby League Club in Western Australia, which kind of explains why they've got like that Serbian rugby component already part of there. And obviously Red Star Belgrade is a big conglomerate of basketball, rugby and football sides as well. So it makes sense that they're trying to look to move into those markets. They potentially are the ones that are fronting most of the cash for this. The fascinating portion is I didn't expect anybody to have $60 million up their sleeve for Champions League. I can't imagine they're going to have too much above and beyond that to then go and put forward for A-League football. So one, yes, it's very exciting that Sportsflick's involved and they're trying to get, different football competitions as part of their branding. But I don't know how deep, and unfortunately because we don't know exactly what their funding model is and exactly where that cash is coming from, we don't know how deep that well goes. Maybe they've got another $40 million to get a year of A-League football, and that's how they're going to try and leverage those 1.3, 1.5 million people it might be by that stage. But until we actually kind of know and understand that, it does really kind of mean that you think Sportsflick's put all its eggs in the Champions League basket, because they've also picked up the UEFA Women's Champions League, they picked up the K-League, the Austrian League that you mentioned, Nicaragua, all that sort of stuff. What it does, though, is it creates a vacuum at Optus Sport, where Optus Sport, if they're serious about continuing their football coverage, if they've got people like Mark Schwarzer, John Aloisi, whoever else on the books, and they're going to be paying them for the next 2-3 years, they've created a vacuum now that the Champions League previously filled, that now Optus is probably going to be more driven to go and get another football competition. Ideally, and this is like a dream type scenario, they'll start looking more domestically based, and they'll look at the A-League and the W League and the FFA Cup to say, okay, we've lost this football product that was a big part of our appeal. How do we replace that? And how do we replace that within a similar budget to what we could do? I would be honestly very surprised if we get more money than the current Fox Sports funding, which is that $32 million figure that you announced. If we're using that as a baseline, effectively maybe Optus can take some of that funding, put it towards trying to secure domestic football rights, and that vacuum created makes it more competitive for that rights period, and we get more people bidding on it. We don't know if Fox is going to go back in. Stan has previously signalled intent, but it's only speculation on Twitter, that they are interested in the A-League if it stays as a summer competition. We're not sure if that's a deal breaker or not. And Optus Sport obviously, hopefully now, are looking to fill that vacuum, or unfortunately, they'll start looking away from football. So yeah, I think the vacuum it creates is fascinating, but I don't know how much it's actually going to impact the actual money available for different people bidding on the A-League rights themselves.
Yeah, fascinating indeed. I mean, thinking about it now, Sportsflick could be the saviour of Australian, like the A-League and W League broadcast in terms of they created that vacuum, and then Optus Sport has to go out and get that. So who knew? Sportflick saving Australian football right there. Bill, what do you think? So a question for you. So obviously we don't know a ton about Sportsflick. We haven't got a lot of experience with their broadcasting and what they offer. How would you feel as an A-League fan if they came out and announced next week that they had secured the rights for the A-League? How would you feel, balancing what we don't know about them, but also all the turmoil that's gone through with Fox Sports? Do you think that would be a good thing or a bad thing?
First, I think
there's a lot of unknowns in there, so I go for it.
I think the first emotion I would probably feel if I saw that would be relief, in that we've got a secure broadcast deal moving forward, because it's purely speculation, but at this point it really doesn't look like we have one with Fox going forward. It doesn't look like they'll be staying on after this season. And as we've said, it doesn't really look like they care too much about the quality of the coverage this season either. So that being said as well, there probably weighs into you, well, yeah, there's a few unknowns about Sportsflick, but when you weigh up sort of the things about, the Fox coverage has been average at times, maybe to be a bit kind, this season. I think if you weigh that up with perhaps the unknowns, it sort of balances out a bit, and you probably, at least I'm sort of okay with it. And I think it's kind of exciting to see maybe perhaps a new route for Australian football broadcasting, something different, because we've had Fox for I don't know how many years now, but I think, obviously they've been on our screens for a long time, and maybe they can perhaps Sportsflick can hopefully show them what they could have been doing and should have been doing maybe.
What do you think, Sean? Same question to you, mate. If Sportsflick announced this week that they had the A-League rights, do you think that would be a good thing or a bad thing?
It'd be a fascinating thing. I'd be very curious as to where that funding model's coming from. And I'd also be very curious to see the longevity of the agreement. I think the fact that the Champions League rights are only 3 years isn't necessarily the best for that A-League as its current format. So, like, full disclosure, and we haven't really run past this part, like you mentioned Fox Sports history, the $120 million odd that they submitted into the A-League, or that they used to kind of fund the A-League over the opening 10 years, really kept that competition afloat. I think what we need from the next deal is some sort of stability throughout like a 4 to 5 year period. I don't think we'd want like a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal again. I think that creates too much volatility in the market, too much volatility in the pricing at a time that we really need to try and get it. Like James Johnson seems like a smart dude, probably smarter than any of us appearing on this podcast. You'd have to think the biggest leverage that they've got is that they can now leverage the A-League, the W League, the FA Cup, and the upcoming cycles for both the 2022 World Cup for the men and the 2023 World Cup for the women as well. So I'd say they're trying to tie together quite of that into like a value-added bundle to say, hey, here's everything that you're going to get if you go and sign up for like a 5 to 6 year period. That's what I would want. Obviously, I think we're in a different generation now. If we were going back, Brandon, having this conversation 3-4 years ago and it was the Gallop era at FFA, it would be 100% whoever was going to pay the most cash for it. That's just the reality of that situation. That's why we have Western United and Macarthur in the A-League at the moment, because they had the most funding. That's not me being critical of those teams. I wish them all the success in the world, shout out to their fans, all that sort of stuff, but that's the reality of the situation. They paid the most for their licenses. Now that we're down the track, we've got football people involved. There's a few things that I'd love to see that I don't think are necessarily realistic, but what I do want to see is them actually leveraging what is a very passionate fan base. Like, football Twitter never dies, no matter what. Like, the NSL era is still going alive and well. Shout out to SMFC Mike if he's out there. Like, there's a whole bunch to really like be passionate and excited about, and Fox Sports isn't showcasing that at the moment deliberately. It would be very frustrating if they go back down that route, even if Fox does provide the most lucrative option. I think they're all kind of looking at it saying this is not what we want for football coverage and it's not what our fan base deserves. And then at the same time, also, how do we build this, make it better, and make it like a global world level, international tier competition and organisational structure in advance for the eyes that are going to be on us during 2023. I think that's a big spectre that kind of looms on the horizon that we haven't necessarily covered when it comes to A-League and W League. It could end up getting split, and they split up all these competitions differently because they think that's the most lucrative way. But I think James Johnson's a smart guy, and I think they're in good hands in terms of creating that value-added bundle and getting the best deal, not just for one particular league, the A-League or the W League, but for football as a whole, and the best way that we can get as many of our games on television. We still don't get like young Matilda's games or Ollie Roos games and all that sort of stuff, and that's mind-boggling that in 2021 we can't make that work.
Well, so my next question is sort of kind of touching on what you mentioned there, Sean. What do we think the best broadcast deal for the A-League and the W League going forward looks like? Now, not just from like an economic and a business point of view, but, you know, from a fan perspective, what would we want to see? And Bill, I'll go to you first. Sorry, what do we want to see from the broadcast deal in terms of pre-production, like pre-game shows? You know, Fox, they used to do what was it, Saturday Night Shootout, or they had Santos Salmon Ed. They had a whole bunch of sort of side shows going as well, rather than just, you know, the classic pre-game coverage. Bill, what do you think, you know, from a fan, what sort of stuff would you want to see from a potential A-League, W League broadcast rights holder?
Yeah, I'd love to see more than just the football. I mean, obviously, I love football and football's great and we all love watching football, but I think I'm a bit worried by the precedent sort of set by Fox this season in terms of sort of just showcasing the football, 2 minutes pre-game chat, 2 minutes post-game chat, a little bit of halftime chat around the adverts. That really worries me if that's set as a sort of precedent leading into future seasons and broadcasters look at that and go, hey, we don't have to put all this effort in. We can just do that. And they'll watch it and they'll put up with it because they did it with Fox, you know, in 2021. It's hard to say because, well, I think obviously we haven't had such a good example in terms of a real nice, good broadcasting package that showcases more than just the football itself in the last few years. But I would love to see some more of that external stuff come back and some of these other shows. I think even something like, we've seen like a league of their own sort of come up, sort of an external thing, but something like that could maybe come into the fold. But I'd love to see all of these external shows sort of come back, like this, you know, Saturday Shootout and that sort of thing, and get that extra coverage on football instead of just this 2 minute pre-game post-game chat. Because for me, I used to revel in the pre-game and post-game stuff. I used to love watching that. That was you know, family used to get on me because you go, oh, the game hasn't even started yet and you go to the TV. Well, it's like, well, yeah, this is really interesting. But with that sort of dying off, it sort of, I guess, puts a bit of a damper on the broadcast for me. But I don't know what you think, for instance, Sean, but.
Yeah, I guess this kind of comes into the difference between like a hosting platform, so like a broadcaster that effectively just rebroadcasts somebody else who's captured that footage, which is what Optus Sport is. It's what Sportsflick is. There's a difference between that and what an actual broadcast partner is, who's there with their own cameras that they own and operate, their own staff, whatever else, filming and then distributing live that product. At the moment, that's the challenge. There aren't that many people, or there aren't that many bidders within the A-League, W-League, whatever football landscape that are actually there capturing their footage each week. Fox Sports does that, and they're one of the few that does. Even though they're not doing it great, they've only got 3 cameras at the moment. That's a bit shit, but like they are quite good and have been for the whole history of the A-League as being in each stadium with their camera crews getting the live feed out. I know they've not had the greatest 12 months, and we can talk about that in a future week, but that's really the difference. Where they're looking for Optus Sport to start becoming that, someone that's going to buy camera work and they're going to actually have people in the stadium as like a practice run. We know Optus Sport's cameras have been at some NPL fixtures. Potentially they're looking to try and like leverage and grow that. We don't know. Potentially there is also other stuff that it could be done in-house. Now, this is my dream scenario, so everyone suspend your disbelief, all right? Because this takes quite a bit of like creativity to actually think it's going to work. What I would love to see is that now the A-League is independent, now the Australian Association of Professional Leagues, or whatever it's called, is running the A-League and W-League competitions. Does mean that there is, funding and space and time available at FFA. What I would love to see is an expansion of the FFA TV or FA TV or the MyFootball Live app, so that Football Federation Australia does what I think is the riskier option there, where they start developing their own live broadcast capabilities. So FFA, or Football Australia, apologies, will like pay their own cameramen, they'll pay their own broadcast people. They'll still probably get hosts and whatever from each different nationality or each different broadcaster, but they will then be able to go and sell on the rights based on their broadcast capability. It may be without commentary. It may be without, pre-game, post-game shows, whatever else, but they're at least the ones operating the cameras in the stadium and getting that live feed out there into the world. I think if they do that, one, it's going to make for a fascinating conversation locally as to who's going to pay for those rights, because it takes out the limitations for Sportsflick and for Optus Sport and whoever else. But then on top of that, I think if the A-League Football Australia has the ability to sell the A-League and W-League individually into other countries, they're going to increase their markets. And I think that's going to help them quite a bit. I think if they took a long-term strategy saying we're going to spend $10 million a year to create this live broadcast scenario with a view to then selling on the rights for the 2023 World Cup, I think that's going to be successful for them. And I think that's the way that we try and then leverage like getting more young Matildas games, getting more Olyroos games, young Socceroos, all that sort of stuff as well, because it'll be Football Australia filming and broadcasting those games, and we're not reliant on some other individual company or broadcaster having to physically be in the arena. And I think that's been a limitation. I think if Fox Sports don't think anyone's going to watch a game, they're not going to do anything other than have someone film it on a Nokia 3310 or whatever they've been doing with some of the W League coverage. So it's a challenge. I would love to see Football Australia take that risk and go that route. I don't think it's going to happen, but there is a part of me that's got my fingers and toes crossed that it could go that direction.
Well, what sort of what would you want to see it include? So you mentioned Young Matildas, you mentioned Olyroos. What about the NPL? NPL TV is a thing in New South Wales and up in Queensland as well. I know Football Victoria broadcast their own NPL games as well. Is that something that could fit into your grand scheme there, Sean?
It does, but then that becomes this whole other political discussion about how much Football Victoria want to cede their control to Football Australia, and that has been a long-running historical issue between all of the states, like Football New South Wales in the same boat, Football Queensland, and then other states that maybe don't have the funding to do that live scenario, like Football SA, Football WA, Football NT, Football Tasmania. Like that puts a lot of pressure on them as well. So I'm not sure if it does expand that level just yet. Maybe down the future, like maybe you look at a 5-year plan that eventually gets NPL programs in there. What I would say is more likely is if that has become a conversation where you have the capacity to then film both a national A-League tier and then a national second division tier, because you've got the capability of doing that, then I think that becomes more localised, more regional. Potentially, you start handing over NPL TV the ability to broadcast a national second division if the game's taking place in that state. I'd say that would be a better pathway to try and get to what you're talking about, which is like a full broadcast capability. Like I've only got so much time every weekend, Bram, with kit clashes and games to go to and all that sort of stuff, as we saw last week with our NPL journeys. But yeah, like I think there's a step and a pathway to it. I don't think it happens day one though. I think it's something that you gradually build towards, and you do that by incorporating the existing state structures rather than Football Australia taking like over approaches that they don't necessarily need to.
One thing that I saw from Optus Sport as well that I really like, talking about things that we want to see from potential future broadcasters, was the Football Belong series that they did, where they went around to a whole bunch of local community clubs and sort of looked at the roots and really sort of explored, you know, the cultural connection that a lot of football clubs in Australia have to, you know, other European countries. And I think that I really liked it because we haven't really seen like, you know, Australian football culture and the history sort of embraced like that. So I know that was one thing that Optus Sport did. I would love to see more of that. I would love for a future potential broadcaster to really sort of embrace Australian football and sort of dive deep into the history. Because Sean, as you mentioned, you know, there's still a super strong NSL culture, and that's sort of a, you know, a forgotten history or a period that's sort of really overlooked. But I think that sort of pretty much brings us to an end of our broadcasting discussion. I think the big thing that we have going forward, though, is while we don't know what the next broadcast deal is going to look like, it's great that there are plenty of options available, whether that be Stan or KO or Optus Sport or Sportsflick, or who knows, maybe there's a new party, maybe the reserve team bids for it. You know, maybe we just put a couple of heads together, you know, chime in, and who knows. But it's good to see that, you know, worst case scenario, it won't just go back to Fox Sports and KO by default. So I think while there is a lot of uncertainty going forward, I think there's it's going to be a fascinating one. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Speaking of playing out, Sean, what we're going to do now, though, mate, is I'm going to hand the reins over to you, and we are going to see how last week's Reserve Team Hall of Fame nominations played out.
If it ends up being that Rose has got $60 million squared away somewhere to bid on the A-League, I'm going to be furious that we're all unpaid interns, but that's fine. We'll deal with that in a few weeks. Looking at the Hall of Fame. Now, last week we had three fantastic nominations from Stephen. Teo Pellizzeri was nominated for, I think, the third time. Bran, you, of course, harked back to your Mariners roots and every win that you've ever had being related to them by nominating the Tim Cahill ball boy that removed the corner flag as Tim Cahill ran up to celebrate it. And I nominated De Villa's Mexican cheer squad, or the Wellington Phoenix's Mexican cheer squad, who's kind of come out of nowhere and become the best active support in the country. Now, in third position, with 13.6% of the vote, Teo Pellizzeri still can't get his way in there, even though he had fantastic coverage on the W League last night again. Cahill Ballboy has finished in second with 27.3% of the vote, and the man of the people again, 11-time nominee and winner Sean, his nomination, De Villa's Mexican cheer squad, has actually come through with 59.1% of the vote, Bran. It wasn't even close this particular week. You got to lift your game.
That's all right. Don't worry. I've got a big one in store for this week, Sean. Don't worry. We're upping our game from ball boy. I thought that would strike a nerve. You know, and maybe we should have whoever put the tweet out should have included the video. But you know, that's fine. You know.
Whoever, like, your leverage is basically if Marvin sees it or not. So you've just got to keep Marvin involved as much as possible. Once he gets a hold of one of your things, that's when you dominate. But I am now 11-time champion, Branson, and you are miles behind. But we are going to set it up again. We've got more nominations this week. The fantastic thing about football is that there's always chaotic memes and whatever else that come out of a particular week's games that allow us to then go on and have new nominations. Bill, you are not usually on the podcast. There is a habit at the moment that Brand and I are trying to steal each other's ideas and nominations right before we go live. So we're going to give you an opportunity to do yours first so that there's no chance that we like kind of send you in the wrong direction. Who would you like to nominate for the Reserve Team Hall of Fame this week?
Yeah, well, hopefully I haven't jumped in and taken something from you boys, because I'm coming out of breaking news on recording day for us. Stephen Longpins Taylor's returning to the A-League, and I don't know if you boys saw, but it was quite interesting this morning. A-League memes got around their 4-part story of the jet ski experience that was won by a Knicks fan. You have to forgive me, I'm not entirely sure I remember how that came to be. It may have been a bushfire fundraiser, I'm not entirely sure. But, you know, apparently word on the street is that never happened, unfortunately, for the unlucky winner of that competition. But I just thought that I'd like to nominate the Wellington Phoenix this week for getting around the initiative and bringing it back together. I don't know if you saw their tweet, but this morning they just put out, "Can anyone in Wollongong hook us up with a jet ski?" asking for a friend. So I think I want to nominate the Stephen Taylor Longpins jet ski experience for the Hall of Fame this weekend.
And a worthy nomination. Good to see Stephen Taylor back in the league. I'm sure many Knicks fans are returning. It's good to see that jet ski could still actually go forward. Hopefully they get a few more bids out there, and maybe if we do have any cash in the coffers here at reserve team, one of us will be able to head up there and jump on the back with him. Branson, I know that you're sitting there kind of grinding your teeth, worried that I'm about to steal yours, so I will be the bigger man. I will be the 11-time champion. I'll hand over to you first. No. Who would you like to nominate this week?
Man, I thought you were going to try to throw to me, and I was going to come out with a... Nah, I'll save it for next week. I won't use my own zinger on myself. I'll save it. But my nomination is a big one. This one, again, I mentioned a few weeks ago that we, while we have a Hall of Fame, we probably need a Hall of Shame. And this one would be a good contender for both, I feel. I want to hark back to, don't know what year it was, 2018, the Brisbane Roar, when they were appearing in the Asian Champions League. The Champions League's always weird because the teams have to wear sort of different kits, with different sponsors. Brisbane Roar were taking on, I think it was Cerros Negros, and mid-game they had their numbers start peeling off the back. It happened on Ivan Frančić. It happened on Eric Botiek and Jamie Young's jerseys as well. The numbers on the back started peeling off. There are iconic images of the numbers being held on just with sports tape. I think that was an iconic A-League moment. And it wasn't just sort of taking A-League memes, just to Australia. It was taking A-League meme-worthy content, all around Asia. An iconic moment. I think that deserves a spot in our Hall of Fame, Sean.
And shout out to Craig Moore, who I think lost his job as director of football as a result of that fiasco. I'm sure there was more that went into it than that, but yeah, that was ridiculous. I think by the end of it, Botiak actually just came out in a kit that was an entirely taped number. There was no remaining normal number on there anymore. But yeah, we hark back to hopefully better appearances from the Brisbane Roar this season in the Champions League. And as well, shout out to Melbourne City, who are going to be there along with Sydney FC. I am going to, because we've got Bill on, I thought I had to think of something that's specifically Adelaide, something that's unique within the region, unique within the league. I wanted to try and give him something to be proud of. The last couple of weeks of Adelaide home fixtures, anytime there has been a VAR decision, they have been playing the Jeopardy music in the background over the club speakers, and it is brilliant. I don't know why people didn't click onto the fact that they could have been doing that all throughout the VAR fiascos throughout the course of this week. We saw again that Jared Gillett VAR decision and discussion went viral on Twitter again. They released another one this past weekend from the Melbourne City Western Sydney game. Why aren't we drawing more attention to the fantastic work of the Adelaide MCs and DJs there at Cooper Stadium? Because every time that music comes on, I audibly laugh out loud, and it doesn't take much to kind of crack me up, but it's very rare that in the current Fox Sports environment, something that happens in football coverage, it gets me to laugh. So I'm nominating Adelaide's use of the Jeopardy theme song for VAR decisions. I think that is fantastic, and hopefully other clubs around the division notice it and start thinking up their own little theme song for when we have those VAR breaks, because there's bugger all else to do while we're watching a man go and stare at a screen for 10 minutes.
You're gonna set me off on a tangent here, Sean. That's so overrated. I see it every time on Twitter. They talk about, how good is it that the Jeopardy music? That's so overrated. They are not the first people to do that. That's been going on at sporting events for years. Anyway, we'll see how the people vote. We'll see how they go. People seem to like you for whatever reason, and then if they don't like you, just rig the Twitter poll anyway. So we'll see what happens. I know what you've been up to there.
How my burner accounts vote is my own business. You could make your own if you wanted to. It's easy to get a Hotmail address at the moment. But 3 worthy nominations. We will, of course, have a poll up on Twitter towards the end of this week or when this episode goes live, so that you can cast your vote. And if you've got nominations that we haven't gotten to over the last few weeks, by all means, let us know down in the comment section below, and someone may champion your nomination for a particular week. But Bran, I'm going to handball back to you. You're going to steer the ship again as we go through some of our W League and A League previews.
Absolutely. The Hall of Fame nomination segment, I mean, it's getting a little bit bit fierce between you and I. Now, when you nominate someone, I get physically angry. It's taken a strange turn. But I'm not angry. I'm excited when we take a look forward to the upcoming A League and W League fixtures. We'll start off with the A League. Today, Friday, we have the Adelaide United taking on Newcastle Jets. Tomorrow, we've got Brisbane Roar taking on Sydney FC. Then we have the Melbourne Derby, Mel Classico, the Melbourne Victory taking on Melbourne City. On Sunday, the Distance Derby, Wellington Phoenix taking on Perth Glory, followed by I think Western United might have tweeted it out, the Western Battle of the West or something like that. They had some sort of play on words for the West Derby. Western United taking on Western City. Looking ahead again to next week as well. On Monday night, Central Coast against Macarthur, a top of the table clash in that one. And on Wednesday, Sydney FC taking on Western United. Taking a look at all of those games as a whole, Bill, which one stands out to you? Which one are you most looking forward to watching?
The shirt I'm wearing probably gives away a little bit in that regard, and the fact that as soon as we've finished recording, I'll be hopping in my car and driving down South Road in Adelaide in peak hour traffic to get down to Cooper Stadium for tonight's game, which against the Newcastle Jets, which I'm really excited about. I think it's exciting as an Adelaide United fan, a full squad back. Ryan Strain's back from injury, Michael Jakobsen's back from injury. Craig Goodwin, he didn't take long to get started again last weekend, did he? So I think there's plenty of exciting things to look at from that perspective. But also, I really like what the Jets have done this year. I've been quite surprised after their first few games. We thought, gee, will they, win a game? It did look pretty bleak for a little while there. But I'm really impressed, with the likes of Valentino Ewell and Angus Thurgate, and I just think it's a very exciting project. I remember, watching our season preview of the Newcastle Jets, and even the Jets fans were a little bit not too optimistic, let's put it that way, or fairly pessimistic about their chances for this season. But I think they've done a pretty good job in turning things around after a rough start. So I think it'll be an interesting game tonight. The ladder's obviously way too close across the board. It seems like at the moment it's too hard to follow what a win means at this rate, because there's just not a lot separating so many teams. But it's very exciting as well. And obviously Melbourne Derby is very exciting as well. And I think there's plenty of exciting fixtures. A shortened distance derby, which is going to be interesting. It's not quite the same as it once was, but it'll be interesting to see. And it's an exciting week of football. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I was just thinking that as well, actually. I was trying to sort of Google in the background, and I haven't been able to do it in time. But is Wellington Perth, while they're playing in Wollongong, is that even the furthest distance derby in the league this season? No idea. Don't know. Couldn't Google it in time. I'll keep plugging away in the background here. But Sean, looking at those fixtures, mate, which one are you most excited for? Which ones do you think are going to be the most intriguing? And can you see any potential upsets in that batch of fixtures as well?
So, full disclosure for you, Brand, I didn't include the games past Sunday in the graphic that's currently showing on the screen, but that's fine. That's no drama. But looking at those 5 fixtures that are up there, they are all crackers. Like Adelaide and Newcastle should be an absolutely fantastic game. Adelaide at home have been excellent all throughout the season. Away form, we'll leave that for another week. Brisbane Sydney FC should be a cracker up in Brisbane. I think gives a huge advantage to the Raw. The Melbourne Derby doesn't really need any introduction. Any chance that Melbourne City get to absolutely spank Victory would be very much appreciated. But Victory usually win when they're losing and do it down towards the bottom of the table, so that'll be a fascinating one. Wellington versus Perth is going to be an interesting contest. I think Wellington seemingly on an upswing. It depends how underdone Stephen Taylor might be. If he can come back into the lineup, that's going to be huge, watching him go up against effectively the front 4 of Perth Glory. And then Western United versus Western Sydney, that's not a Western Derby in any stretch. I hate these marketing people that keep trying to push this stuff. The closest we'd have to a Western Derby would be like Adelaide Perth, because like the world exists outside of Victoria and New South Wales, and we have to acknowledge that at certain points. If I was going to pick a favourite, obviously Mel Classico is the big one for us. We'll try and get that nickname trending over on Twitter for you, Brand. But there are some very, very tasty fixtures throughout the course of this weekend in the A-League and the W League. It's going to be a great weekend for football, and a long weekend as well in Victoria and New South Wales at least. Is it for you as well, Bill?
Yeah, Monday.
Adelaide, perfect. So a long weekend, absolutely perfect. We're going to get a whole bunch of football coming our way, which will be fantastic to see. Branson, what about you though? Which is the pick of the fixtures for you?
Well, the pick of my fixtures is the one that you haven't got up on the display there. So I didn't mean to do you dirty like that. But Central Coast against Macarthur, I think, is going to be fascinating. A top of the table clash. The Mariners have been flying. Macarthur have been, obviously pretty strong. You have to be pretty strong to be sitting in second place as well. I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. If Central Coast win again and defeat Macarthur, then you've got to say that they are, I don't know, they're surely legit. I mean, if you still don't believe that, if they beat Macarthur, then it's, I think that would just be a huge statement. Brisbane Roar against Sydney, as you mentioned, Sean, I think that's going to be mega as well. Sydney have looked vulnerable this year. They've looked sort of, mortal compared to in previous seasons when they've just been nearly invincible. So I think it'll be interesting to see if they can recover and start climbing up the table. Mel Classico. I mean, I'm excited. You're excited. All the City fans are excited. I hope we put 6 past the victory, 6-0. That'd be nice. Whether that happens or not, I am still nervous. As you said, they always seem to find a way to beat us whenever they're doing the worst. So absolutely no idea what's gonna happen in that one. But if we take a look ahead to the W League. So very briefly, last night on Thursday, we saw the Victory defeat Western Sydney 1-0. Taking a look at the fixtures still to come, though, we've got Adelaide taking on Sydney on Saturday. On Sunday, we've got Canberra United taking on the Brisbane Roar. And then on Monday, we have Perth Glory taking on the Newcastle Jets. Bill, you said you're going to the A-League tonight, and you mentioned before as well that you might be going to the W League tomorrow as well.
It's actually going to be my first W League experience. I haven't been able to make it to a game yet, but it's just worked out that I've not got other commitments on tomorrow, and a mate and I are going to head down because we really want to get there, and especially I think it's a bit bittersweet tomorrow night with Dylan Holmes' last game for the club for who knows how long, but it's also a very exciting opportunity for her. So hopefully we can send her off with a win. But I think there's plenty of exciting football on this weekend, and obviously I think Canberra and Brisbane will be a massive game come Sunday. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the football ahead this weekend.
Sean, how big is that Canberra United Brisbane Roar game?
Look, Adelaide Sydney is going to be big as well because they're both currently in the top 3 spots. If Adelaide can get something, I think they effectively secure themselves a top 3 finish as far as the run home is concerned. And if Sydney FC lose, that's going to reel Brisbane back, or that's going to allow Brisbane to kind of reel them back in and potentially jump top of the table. So that's got huge implications. The Sunday game as well, Canberra United Brisbane Roar. This is really like make or break for Canberra United. If they can't get 3 points here after the draw earlier in the week against Melbourne Victory, they are really kind of up against it in terms of making the top 4 this season. So I would expect both of those games to be absolute crackers. I would expect both teams to really, all 4 teams, to really come out and try and win those games and set down a marker to build some momentum heading straight into the final series. And then Perth Glory versus Newcastle Jets, it's a big one even for Perth because this is really their last chance to try and get off the bottom of the table. If they are going to prevent getting the wooden spoon, they need to pick up 3 points and they need to be beating teams like Perth and like Melbourne City and the other sides around them in the league. So all 3 games still to come this weekend. Again, going to be fantastic. It sucks that some of them are overlapping with the A-League matches and we'll have to pick and choose our favourites. But yeah, fantastic weekend of football ahead.
All right, guys. So taking a look at the fixtures, we're going to go through now, and I want to get each of your predictions. Let's start off with the W League. We'll take a look at the Adelaide United Sydney FC clash. A couple of big storylines to go through, not only with this game, but the remainder of the W League and the A-League games as well. So, Bill, you mentioned, Adelaide United captain Dylan Holmes leaving the club 3 weeks ahead of the finals to join Swedish side BK Häcken. Big loss. Is that going to be a motivator, and can you see that, sparking Adelaide to a win here?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because obviously we came up against Sydney, only a few weeks ago, and we fell a bit short. And I think poor Annalie Grove copped it a bit because I think she had a bit of a rough time in set pieces in that game, and a few other things that were a little bit just the difference maker in that. And it was a fairly tightly matched affair in the end. But I think the fact that Dylan Holmes is leaving is a bit of a blow to this team. And I think we've just seen the discussion around it the other day about what a great character she is and how good she is around this team. Will probably spur them on to probably really wanting to give her a good send-off, and hopefully they can find a way, at least for the Adelaide United fan in me, to do that. But I think it might have something to do with it. I think at the end of the day, though, I see Sydney probably coming out on top, just too good.
Sean, what's your prediction? And also, how does this sort of impact, the league as a whole? A player leaving 3 weeks out to join finals, of course, going to Sweden, which has quite a huge women's league there as well. I believe she'll have a chance to play in the Champions League as well. Is this sort of a flaw in W League deals, perhaps? Or is it just the kind of thing that when an opportunity like this arises, it's just bad luck?
Look, it's not necessarily bad luck. I think it's more... Your overarching strategy would be, do you want to be looked at as a club that helps develop players get to that level that they eventually make jumps to Europe and North America? Or do you want to be looked at as a club that's potentially trying to put together the best side to win a title? And I think the W League at the moment as a whole is kind of in a flux period. Even Sydney FC's lineup, as good as they are, they're still relatively young. Like Remy Simpson's way younger than people think she is because she's been around for ages. Courtney Vine's very young. Princess Sabini very young. Like these are talented young players that they're really trying to put out there and get minutes each and every week so that they'll improve and grow. I think the Dylan Holmes one is is fascinating. She's been excellent this season. She 100% would be like amongst discussions for teams of the season and that sort of thing. But I don't think Adelaide would want to present themselves to potential signings in the future as being a club that has held back players previously. I think they could use this as a selling tool to say to someone like a talented midfielder that's maybe not getting minutes or is playing in a poorer side like Newcastle or Perth and say, come and play for Adelaide because we've got a proven track record and history of actually developing players to go and play in Europe or to go and play in North America. So I think now that Dylan Holmes making this moving, while the timing isn't fantastic and it's not the best in terms of, Adelaide's season, it is a fantastic opportunity for her. And I think it's a fantastic kind of validation for their footballing program that they are creating and developing these players to then make that jump to international football, which is what we want to see. We want to see more Matildas playing internationally because it helps the overall depth of our squad and it helps the overall quality that we're seeing in the league itself.
I think
the next yep.
Sorry, just to cut in, Brett. I think that's a really interesting point you make, Sean, about how it can be a selling point for Adelaide. And I thought it was interesting. I watched a press the other day where it was Dylan Holmes and the head of football, Ivan Karlovic, was talking about how it's a bit of a testament to the W League program at Adelaide, and this is sort of the way they want to go from here. So I think that's sort of spot on, and that's probably sort of why the reasoning behind it and the timing of how it's come about.
And we should acknowledge as well, like this will be the first ever W League final series Adelaide have ever made if they make it. So like there is history still being made. It sucks that they're going to have to do it without their captain, but she's not the be-all and end-all of their footballing program. Cote Rojas is arguably the be-all and end-all. The whole lot of pressure on her shoulders. If she has a good game, I could see Adelaide getting points against Sydney FC. I'm going to be like a real pain in the ass and tip a draw in this one because I think they're going to cancel each other out. But it should be a fascinating contest no matter what.
Taking a look at the next one. Cam United against Brisbane Roar. Bill, who are you picking here?
It's tough to say, and I think two sides have been very impressive this year. Obviously, I just think Brisbane had that little bit too much. The likes of Emily Gielnik. Sorry, I have to forgive the butchering of the pronunciation, but I just think Brisbane have got too much quality in this one, and they'll come out on top. Just they want to keep that gap at the top. So yeah, I think Brisbane will come out on top for this one.
Sean, who are you picking? And is this sort of Canberra United's last real chance to make the finals? Obviously, they won't be mathematically eliminated here, but we saw they started the season off so strongly. They've sort of gone from contenders to mid-table. Is it more of a, not just a mathematical thing, but a big chance for a statement here?
Look, not a statement. Canberra are a fascinating case because they're such a small market and they've got such a small women's program. Like Vicky Linton deserves coach of the season as far as I'm concerned for the work she's done with that group. I just again, Bill, you nailed the pronunciation of Gielnik. I wouldn't worry too much about that, but I just think there's too much strength in that squad. Arguably, and this is a weird sentence to say, they lost Katrina Gorry and I think they actually got better because they weren't really looking to an individual player to try and create something as much. They moved the ball much quicker. I think Jake Goodship's got them hitting form at the right time. They've got Alira Toby. They've got Larissa Crummer, who's back in scoring form, who's had an excellent story. Like Brisbane have the best depth of any squad. They're unbeaten to date. They have been rolling teams lately. I think they've got like 14 goals in their last 3 matches. I'd love Canberra and I'd love to see Canberra in the top 4 at the expense of the victory, but I just can't see anybody getting anywhere near Brisbane in the run home here.
Taking a look at the last game then, Perth Glory is taking on the Newcastle Jets. Sean, you said you thought it was Perth's last chance to sort of get themselves off the bottom of the table. What are your predictions here?
Even though it is Perth's last chance, and I kind of want to give them the benefit of the doubt about their football program, Newcastle have, to their credit, had an absolute crack at every game that they've played. They haven't taken a backward step against anybody. So they'll go out there, they'll try and play football, and I think they'll be rewarded for their effort. I think Perth Glory's strategy in the few games that we've seen for them, they've got quite a few games to come as well, Brian. I think they've only played 6 or 7 matches comparative to the rest of the teams that are closer to 9 or 10. Even their plan A doesn't seem to be a winning plan. So even when things work out for them and go well, they don't really look like they're going to win matches using that strategy and style. So I think Newcastle will get the result here, but again, I would love for Perth to surprise me.
Bill, who are you picking, mate?
Yeah, I think with this one, I struggle to see Perth breaking that rut. I think obviously they've really struggled this year, but tough to say. Obviously it's sort of a last chance for them, obviously, to try and catch up to the rest of the teams and climb a bit off that bottom spot on the ladder. But I just see it being probably a step too far for them probably in this game.
Interesting. We'll take a look at the A-League fixtures now. The first one we're going to talk about, obviously, I was just waiting for the graphic to load there. The first one we're going to talk about is Adelaide taking on Newcastle Jets. Bill, who are you picking, mate?
Yeah, I mean, gonna fully acknowledge the bias of the shirt I'm wearing again, but I think it's too hard to look past Adelaide tonight. Obviously, the Jets have been a quality side this year, and I think the likes of Buell and O'Donovan up top and will really cause us problems. And I think Thurgate might disorientate our midfield a bit as well. Especially, I think that the system they play with that back five with the overlapping wing backs, I think could also cause our shape a bit of problem. It might find our fullbacks sort of struggling to figure out where to go and who to track and who to follow. But I just think we'll probably come out the winners tonight. I think having Tommy Urich back and scoring form, obviously after his hat trick the other week, controversial of course, but I think having him in form and hopefully raring to go tonight will be good. And Goodwin's back and he didn't muck around last week. Took just over a minute to get started. So I think we just might have a bit too much for him tonight. And I think the game will be probably won in the midfield tonight. I think that'll be the tightest battle, so it should be interesting.
Sean, how do you see this one playing out, mate?
Kind of contrarian to what Bill said, and apologies, Bill, but I think that three at the back really gets kind of found out against teams that play high wingers, and there's a lot of space in between those wing backs if they can get it. I think, contrary to what he's just said about Tommy Urich, I think Adelaide actually probably had and looked their best when they had like both the Toure brothers out there and they had that extra mobility and they were really running at teams. So it'll be fascinating to see what lineup they go with. I think the likes of Goodwin and the Toure brothers will be the difference going up like pretty much man to man with that back three, which is very experienced but a lot older. Like we've seen a lot of people struggling to handle the movement of Adelaide's front three at the moment. What I would ask, Bill, is what is your preferred front three from the players currently available? Because the depth in the wings is probably the best in the league.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think the first name on the team sheet has to be Goodwin. I just think it's undeniable his quality. I don't think you could leave him out. You'd be a fool to do so. So he'd have to take up that left wing spot, I think. I'd still put Urich up front to start a game. I like perhaps Mo Toure leading the line sort of last 30 minutes, bringing him on those fresh legs, full energy against sort of, like you said, a sort of an older Newcastle back three, I think could really stretch the game and change the game, especially maybe if we're chasing the game. Even if we're not, it leaves Newcastle wary of the fact that they can't just chase the game and push men forward because they've got to be wary of Mohamed Toure. And we saw a breakaway goal from him last week as well. So I think he's probably more of an option off the bench. And then that right wing spot, it's hard to look past Benny Halloran. Tough on Alassane Toure. You'd argue he could play anywhere in that three. And then again, you've got to look at, I think Pacific Nyongabiri is a really good player who he's just a bit unfortunate. He had a really good breakthrough sort of the back end of last season, and this season he's just, like you said, it's probably one of the best depth positions in the league, our wingers at the moment. And he's just really unfortunate that he sort of struggled for time on the pitch because of that. So I think, whatever way you go, there's not a lot of room to go wrong. But that's sort of probably how I look at it.
Yeah, I am going to pick Adelaide. I think Adelaide will have too much at home, but also shout out to Lirid and Krasniqi, who potentially is going to get some minutes for Newcastle based on Football Manager, and we know, Bram, we base too much on Football Manager as far as this podcast is concerned. He is very, very good in that game, so potentially we are looking at a star of the league if he can hit the ground running and see how he goes.
Definitely. Moving on to the next game, we've got Brisbane Roar taking on Sydney FC. Sean, Sydney have lost 2 in a row, winless in their last 3. How do you see this one going?
Brisbane at home are a different side to Brisbane everywhere else. I think the only side that they've beat interstate is Melbourne Victory at the moment, and a lot of teams are doing that at present, and they were pretty limp, to be fair, against Perth Glory. I thought Danzaki had a good game, but I think like Golgo Mabratu had probably one of the worst games we've seen in the season thus far, and I don't like picking on Golgo. I love him from back in the day at Melbourne Heart, but like maybe if they have had Scott McDonald or Wenzel Halls playing more centrally up front, that would have been better for them. Apparently, and this is only conjecture based on the Fox Sports commentary, so it could be completely full of shit, but they've been working with Dylan Wenzel-Hawes to get him to take on more of like a hold up the ball type role, which to me just seems absolutely bonkers. The best part of Brisbane's season are watching him like isolate defenders 1v1 in transition, and I think if they're getting away from that, it's not a step in the right direction. But having said that, Warren Moon's a very talented manager who keeps proving it each and every week. This will be a fascinating contest. Sydney FC still can't score. They haven't solved that problem from last season. season, where Lafondra, his individual quality and ability to finish half chances really bailed them out quite a few times in the season. They haven't quite settled on their best lineup. We've spoken about on Weekend Recap, they're at their best when they've got the likes of King, Nieuwenhof, Wood on the field, and Steve Corica seems to be the only one that doesn't see that yet. So yeah, it'd be fascinating tactically to see how these two line up against each other. I'm going to just shade it with Brisbane. I think they're going to be looking to bounce back after a poor performance in Perth.
What do you think, Bill? Are you tipping a Brisbane victory as well?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard to look at Sydney with the run of form they're at the moment. I think Sean's brilliantly covered the issues they have at the moment going forward, especially. I think they're going to have to find a way to score some goals, and I'm not sure they'll be able to manage to do it against what's been a fairly strong Brisbane defence this season. But yeah, I think Brisbane is too strong in this one. Sydney really needing to find some answers to some serious questions that they've had this season. So yeah, Brisbane for me tonight in that one.
The next game is, of course, Mel Classico, Melbourne City taking on the Melbourne Victory. Bill, it's a big derby clash. Can you see the Victory salvaging anything from this, or is it going to be, a walk in the park for City?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I think, while Victory obviously struggled this season, I think when there's this thing about, the big games that even sides that are struggling always find a way to turn up and try and grind out a result or at least do themselves proud, because you never want to go down in a nasty defeat to your crosstown rivals. But I just think City are too good for them at the moment. I think Victory, they're just a bit seesaw at the moment, and I don't think they've got enough continuity in their squad and fluidity in their gameplay. And I think, I think Melbourne City will come out on top, just too good at the moment. Obviously, they were very impressive against the Wanderers the other night. So, yeah, I think City will come out on top in this one.
Sean, what do you think, mate? Victory are at risk of losing back-to-back derbies here as well, following up their 4-3 defeat to Western United. What do you see happening?
Look, it's an interesting one because Melbourne City, let's focus on the City side of it. For 3 weeks, they were pathetic and they lost 3 on a trot to pretty poor sides that a good team would have been beating in Newcastle, in Central Coast after being 2-0 up, all that sort of stuff. But then their last 2 performances are arguably the best of the season against Sydney FC, which still somehow, despite being kind of 2-0 up in that one, still ended up being a 3-2 game because we can't do things easily. And then at the same time, like Western City last week, I thought was a very good away performance, but Western City let us get away with a lot. And really their shape and structure played into our hands with getting the ball to Noon and Naboo as early as possible. I am more confident going into derbies if we're in poor form, because it's easy to kind of fire up your fan base. It's easy to fire up your players to say that we need to take ownership of our local area and win in our own city first. So I don't necessarily think form coming into this one is going to be the biggest part of the equation. I look at individual matchups. If we get the Andrew Naboo that played last week and was tearing apart multiple defenders on runs around the box, he's going to give Adama Traore and Nick Ansell a very tough time. And same for Craig Noon. I thought he was excellent, but he was allowed to have the ball in free areas quite a bit. If they're on fire and they can free up space for Jamie McLaren, Melbourne City could be on for a few goals. But Melbourne Victory, this feels like the kind of week where Robbie Cruz will dive twice in the box and they'll win 2-0. That's just where we're at the moment in the A-League. So should be a fascinating contest. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Definitely. Hopefully that Cruz situation does not unfold. That would be quite unfortunate for you and I. Anyway, the next fixture is Wellington Phoenix taking on Perth. Now, Sean, you've been pretty low on Perth for most of the year so far. You haven't been fully convinced. How do you see this one playing out, and what would you want to see from Perth for them to, sort of make an impact on your impression?
It's not that I'm down on Perth. It's the same thing that I said about Brisbane, where I think Perth are an entirely different prospect in Western Australia than they are travelling. You might remember back to that kind of 3-game Victorian stint that they had. They were pretty pathetic against Western United. They were pretty poor for most of the game against Melbourne Victory. Then late on lost it. They're just not really learning, I think, lessons on the road. I could be 100% wrong, and Richard Garcia could have figured something out now that he wants to kind of utilise in this away-from-home structure, but that kind of aggressive 4-2-4 that they're playing isn't necessarily conducive to travelling well, and I think that's going to hurt them in points. As things currently stand, they could have gone top, I believe, if they win all their games in hand on the rest of the teams, up until running into the Central Coast Mariners juggernaut that continues on its way towards an unlikely top finish. I'm not anti-Perth Glory. They've got a ton of quality. Castro is just a class above this league. It's amazing the things that he's still doing at his age. And Wellington Phoenix have issues at the other end of the park where they're struggling to defend quite a bit. So this could be a very entertaining contest. And if Perth Glory can put together a good run of performances away from home, I will be putting them much higher up in our power rankings discussions for the A-League sides.
What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I think personally, I've been very impressed by the Knicks of late. I watched them play against the Wanderers a couple of weeks ago, and I think Reno Piscopo had the ball on a string that afternoon, and obviously they had a good win last week as well. So bit of confidence perhaps coming back for the Knicks, and perhaps we might see a bit more of what we saw from them last season. And I'm backing them to win. I think might be a bit of a goals fest because both sides have obviously struggled a bit defensively. Perth Glory, I think in particular, have struggled defensively, but they've just got a blistering attack. So I think we'll definitely see goals, and I'm tipping the Knicks in this one to come out on top.
And I should touch as well, sorry, Bran, for jumping in. Shout out to Wellington Phoenix, who are doing Wollongong Appreciation Month for the next kind of like 4 weeks of their home fixtures. So this one's actually a doubleheader with a Wollongong Wollongong Wolves game, which is going to be fantastic for the NPL in that region. I think it's really going to help bring those two fan bases together. So hopefully it's a good footballing day and they get a few points as well to get some more of the Wollongong fan base in and around the Knicks for the rest of this season. And of course, the Mexican cheer squad. We can't really go past them at the moment. But shout out to Phoenix for really trying to give back to the Wollongong community, which has done, I think, a fantastic job bringing them into the fold and really embracing them as their local side.
Definitely, and I believe they're going to have another double header later this month as well. And they said on Twitter as well, that the Phoenix did, that they're going to have a special red kit. So that'll be interesting to see what that looks like. But the second last game, because we are going to look at one more after this, is Western United taking on Western Sydney Wanderers. Now, Western United earlier in the week, they did advertise this as West versus West, Kappa versus Kappa. Sean, I know you hate that, but I'll go to Bill first. Bill, how do you see that one playing out, mate?
Don't worry, I'm with you, Sean. There, I think we've seen quite a bit from the Western United marketing team, let's say. I think this season, obviously bringing out the Battle of the Bridge and all these sort of really embracing that. I think they did a lot when they played in that fixture. But I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. Two sides I personally haven't really watched a lot of this season. Obviously, I think Western Sydney fell a bit short the other night, and I actually do quite like them as a side, which is tough to say as an LA United fan watching James Teresi run around for another club after leaving us on the eve of the season. But I think they've actually got a really quality side, especially going forward. I think the options they've got is just unreal. When you look at their bench every week, and it's the likes of Kamau, Duke, or Yaboa, depending on how they're rotating their 11. I think it's just a quality side going forward. But I don't know. I've not been convinced by Western United this season. They've been a bit up and down for my liking, but I still feel like Mark Ruden's got away with this side, and there's obviously a fairly tight-knit bond in that group. It looks like from the outside looking in. So I see them coming out on top as much as the Wanderers have shown quality in recent weeks as well, like a poor run of form.
Sean, what do you think, mate?
It's going to be fascinating because it's a battle of the 3-5-2s. I think Western Sydney, sorry, Bill, and I don't mean to be deliberately contrarian with the things that you're saying. I think Western Sydney are the least tactically flexible side in the competition because even against Melbourne City during the week, they needed to go after it. They really needed to kind of commit more men forward, and they still stuck with that 3-5-2 structure. And even though they're bringing on players like Bruce Kamau, Nicola Mueller, whoever else who would be devastating in wide areas in the late stages of a game, they continue to play them in that same shape and structure, which doesn't suit them at all. If they were utilising Mueller, Abini, Kamau, whoever else in a 3-man front line, I think they'd have a lot better, exchange rate. I think Cox and Duke move into similar areas because they're similar players. I just think no matter what's going on in a game, Western Sydney always follow the same shape and structure. And people might want to discount that, and they can hit us up in the comment section or on Twitter. But I think this Carl Robinson revolution might be a bit overhyped because I just don't see him making smart tactical manoeuvres or anything other than changes in personnel during the course of games. Western United deserve a ton of credit for immediately transitioning into a 4 midfield from their 3-5-2 once they went down to 10 men last week. That kind of group of 4, which at the moment is Berisha, Diamante, who's got a free role to do whatever the hell he wants, and why wouldn't you give him that? Gradzina, who I've probably butchered the pronunciation of, but we're going to barrel on past it, and Victor Sanchez. They are already, all 4 of them, playing fantastically well together. So I think Western United are a team on the rise, and I think Western Sydney, while having been hard to beat early on in the season weren't conceding a lot. Now they are starting to concede goals. They are getting more questions asked of them in possession, and I don't think they're necessarily answering them yet. So I'm going to go with Western United here. And, as far as their social media is concerned, they're throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. So power to them. Good luck. I hope they figure something out that isn't pathetic and makes me roll my eyes.
Bang. Love it. All right. The next game we're going to talk about, Central Coast Mariners taking on Macarthur. Top of the table clash. I mentioned before, Sean, that I thought, this is going to be a really big test for the Mariners. Well, I mean, are they legit or not? I'll be honest, start of the year, I had no wouldn't have believed if you told me that they'd be top of the league and as dominant as they have been. I still keep kind of half expecting them to just fall over. I don't know what it is when I look at their squad. It just doesn't sort of jump out at me as a super strong title-winning team. What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you see this one playing out? And what are your thoughts on Macarthur as well?
Well, this is
just unpack all of that.
Yeah, you've given me like 58 different things to go through. So, Bill, maybe go make a cup of coffee or something because I'll be here a while. But so this is just one of those fascinating things where it's the power of the collective. Like, it's the 11 players on the park and the system that they're playing and how they all work together that's really the highlight of the Mariners. I thought they were fantastic during the week away in Perth Glory. I thought they managed that game fantastically well. I think I'm a big rap this season. He's one of my kind of smokies for player of the season, Gianni Stensnes, who's been magnificent. Please, Arnie, cap him at some point because we can't have him going and playing for New Zealand. And he didn't play. It was Nisbet and Bozanic in midfield and nothing changed. Like, the application was there, the pressing in the right areas was there. They dropped off well and just dealt with like the likes of Castro and Fornaroli and whoever else. They dealt with Carey when he came on. They dealt with Steins, who for whatever reason couldn't figure out that he shouldn't be shooting from 40 yards. Like, Mariners are a very intelligent outfit this season. And while, yes, you're 100% correct, a lot of it is like kind of a island of misfit toys or whatever else. Like, Stefan Negro didn't do very well at Melbourne Victory and was very poor at Brisbane Roar. Ruan Tongi's played for pretty much every club in the Southern Hemisphere at this point. Kai Rouse is a similar story. Jack Clisby's been everywhere. And he's managed to take that group of players that most clubs weren't going to pick up. We're potentially looking at dropping back into MPL to continue playing, and he's made them a back four that's arguably amongst the best in the division at the moment, which is ridiculous. So, huge credit to Alan Stajic, who I think has done a fantastic job. The way that they're working, no one's figured out a solution for it yet. And even leading goal scorer, Golden Boot, Alu Kowal, can't get in the starting lineup. Such is the strength of their structure and such is the strength of the work rate of the likes of players like Matty Simon, and Marco Urena looks to be fantastic as well. So I think everybody is rightly gushing about the Mariners. Shout out to Marty Rayner. Hopefully he's listening to this portion and enjoying it quite a bit on Twitter. But yeah, the sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned. I haven't watched any games where I thought they've fallen off the cliff or they've dropped off or whatever else. They haven't given up in any of the matches that they've done. They're confident in their structure. They're hardworking. Power to them. Hope long may it rain.
Who's going to win? Did we get a prediction out of all that?
I think the Mariners will win. Macarthur are fascinating because they do have a very good side on paper, but are they getting the best out of them? Markel Susueta's assist was absolutely fantastic last weekend against Sydney, but if they didn't have that moment, were they going to score? Probably not. So, they've got flashes of brilliance and they've got capacity to do fantastic things. I don't think they're getting the best out of Benyat. I don't think they're getting the best out of Matt Derbyshire, but I'm not 100% sure Matt Derbyshire is the player that's going to score 10 goals this season. I think he's more of like a link-up player and a very hard worker and obviously very talented. That's not a slight on him. Not all strikers are designed to get 100 goals a season. Where Macarthur potentially lose it is the fact that they've got that kind of age element to it. And I think when you put Macarthur's squad up against Mariners have the running. There's a photo of Gianni Stensnes from 12 months ago to today, and that dude has gotten absolutely shredded. He looks huge. They are physically imposing. This is a different Mariners team to the one that we've seen over the last 5 seasons. And I think the physical battle is where they're going to be too much for the Macarthur, and some of their older heads. That's where I think it's going to be won. Bill, what are you predicting, mate?
Yeah, well, I'm going to chip in. Sorry, John. I'm going to take a quick opportunity just to quickly contradict you in respect of Macarthur. And I think they've actually done a pretty good job with Derbyshire this season, to be completely honest. And I think that's why he's at the top with 7 goals this season. He's not far off your 10 goals, but I at the same time, I still think the Mariners have got too much. And I think you mentioned earlier, Brand, if I looked at that Mariners side on paper, and it's no disrespect to them, and I think it's a credit to them that this isn't actually it. But I think if I looked at them on paper at the start of the season, someone told me they'd be the top team sort of come this time of year, I would have gone, nah, not a chance. But I think it's a true testament to every single individual in that team, the collective as a whole, and also the job Alan Stayich is doing. I think the Mariners will come out on top again. But I think you're right, Sean. There's so many individuals who've come such a long way in that side. I think the likes of Stefan Negro, Kai Rolls. I even think I think someone who's probably gone a little bit under the radar this season is Matt Simon, because I think, at least my assessment of it was that he didn't even get too much game time in last season. But I think this year he's sort of come back into playing in the 11 and was back amongst the goals a bit as well. So I think he's one of the other ones who's probably maybe not been noted as well as some of the other stars who've been emerging. But I think, Mariners too good again for MacArthur, but it'll be a tough one, I reckon.
The very last game that we're going to talk about very quickly is Sydney FC taking on Western United. That one, of course, coming on Wednesday. Bill, who are you picking here?
Yeah, Western United for me. It's been a bit of a tough run for Sydney, and I've picked them to continue that prior to this game as well. But I think Sean mentioned earlier, Western United's like tactical fluidity, and I think that could be something that could be really utilised against Sydney, who are still trying to figure out so many questions to their game. So yeah, I think Western United for me in this one. And
Sean, what are your thoughts, mate?
Don't ever apologise for contradicting me, Bill, because I'm wrong more than I'm right. So you've just got to work the odds in your favour in those ones. But I think this is where Sydney might get their stuff together. The tough part, the only reason I discount Western United here is because that Sunday to Wednesday turnaround and having to travel interstate is probably too big a challenge for the age of their squad. Tomislav Uskok, I think, was the youngest starter last weekend, and he's 26 or 27. So there's an age to that. Diamante seems to just he runs no matter what. But I think guys like Berisha, Sanchez, Grazena as well, it'll be interesting to see how they recover with a 3-day turnaround. So if Sydney are going to start getting some traction, this kind of relates back. I think they're going to lose to Brisbane, but then I think if Sydney are going to get traction, and I think they are still going to finish in the top 6, given the quality of players that they have at their disposal, I think this is where they start turning that around a bit, and they'll have to get 3 points at home against Western United. If they don't, then people are going to start looking at them and saying, is there a potential that Sydney don't make the top 6, which I don't think anybody entertained before the season got underway.
No way. If you'd said that Sydney wouldn't make the top 6, mate, you've left me at a loss for words. If you said that Sydney would not make the top 6 and the Mariners finished on top, I mean, that would just be ridiculous. But I mean, who knows? That could be what happens. There's plenty on the line, and it'll be interesting to see how this week's A-League and W-League fixtures play out. But that does bring us pretty much to the end of the Reserve Team podcast for this week. Bill, thank you very much for joining us. I believe this is your first appearance on the podcast. Where can people go to get more of your information, mate?
Oh, God, I haven't got it ready to hand, friend. Sorry.
What's your Twitter handle? What's your Twitter?
Yeah, I don't know it, actually.
Oh, it's at Bill Brooks 24.
Oh, sorry,
if that's not it, that's what Sean's put in. Of course, people, you can head to thereserveteam.com.au, your home of all things Australian and New Zealand football. You'll see plenty of Bill's content up there as well. Looks like Bill has dropped out.
There's really nothing like the last 5 minutes of a podcast, just the wheels coming off entirely as far as the technology is concerned. So Bill's Twitter, to be clear, is at BillBrooks24. There will be links in the description below to more of his content. But yeah, Brian, I think we can let this train go off the tracks and just upload it pretty much as is. But I'll let you do the final cutaway.
Yeah, definitely. Sean, do you know your Twitter handle? Do you want to read that out?
Maybe I should just say no and then exit the Discord call. That seems to be the trend this week. So, people can check out more of me. Links in the description below. Obviously, reserveteam.com.au. We've got live streams at the moment, which are fantastic, Wednesday and Sunday nights. We have this podcast every week, which we, of course, love doing, Branson. But, yeah, just very much looking forward to football at the moment. It's an exciting time around the country.
Yep, definitely. There's plenty happening in the world of Australian and New Zealand football, and there's plenty happening on the reserve team. You mentioned live streaming on Twitch on Sunday night. The weekend recap is back. We talked before how we love Saturday Shootout. We've got our own version going live on Twitch on Sunday night as well. Bill's back. Fantastic. The weekend recap. Yeah, make sure to check it out. It'll be a live discussion breaking down all of the weekend's games and results as well, and all the hot talking points. Make sure to head to thereserveteam.com.au as well for all the latest news, stories, articles. We cover everything from the A-League to the W-League to grassroots to kick culture. Everything that you could possibly want is up there as well. Please as well, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit us up on Twitter. Hit us up on Facebook. Bill's back to say goodbye as we sign off here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this week's episode of the Reserve Team podcast.